On the short list of K-1 champions, Mark Hunt is the rare one to jump into the ring straight out of a nightclub and conquer the World Grand Prix. Bearing little resemblance to a natural-born athlete, this wrecking ball of fury bet on his indestructible chin. Put on highlight reel brawls. And forever captivated the fan base with one-punch demolitions. Today, we recall Hunt's triumphant K-1 journey, the one that made him that very Super Samoan, the king of walk-off knockouts. Born in 1974 in Auckland, New Zealand, the Samoan would finish school with a couple of overhands and join a street gang.
As I said, I spent more time drinking and smoking in here than anything else, so yeah, don't do that.
By the age of 18, he had added some jail time to his resume. But after narrowly avoiding another prison sentence for starching a bunch of guys near a nightclub, Hunt decided to change his destiny.
Push, Mark, come on, push. Oh, man.
Coming to the gym at the invitation of the bouncer who saved him from the police, Mark secured his first knockout within a week. As a reward, he received a six-pack of beer and was ecstatic because previously he used to beat people up for free. Several years and a couple dozen appearances later, in February 2000, Hunt entered the Oceania Grand Prix hosted by K-1. The Samoan walked through three guys in one night, including Muay Thai national champion Clay Omitagi.
Here comes Mark Hunt!
Omitagi knows he's got to stay up.
He walks straight into a right hand!
In the finale, he flattened out Phil Fagan with a precise uppercut.
There's a big right hand to the side of the jaw. Nice uppercut from Hunt. Fagan goes down! Fagan goes down!
By throwing a couple of concrete blocks at his rival, the 25-year-old Hunt earned a ticket to the big leagues.
Is that he was a guy out of nowhere, had no martial arts pedigree, no boxing pedigree, had gotten into kickboxing because he got into a street fight outside a bar in South Auckland. And here he is taking on some of the best martial artists in the world.
5 months later, Mark traveled to Japan and shared the ring with Jerome. The French cyborg had spent the last decade reducing people to molecules with his nuclear hammers. And turned brains into mush with kicks. Despite a huge leap in quality of opposition, Mark showed that his hands didn't shake. The Southpaw veteran was a natural righty and began slamming step-up leg kicks. Hunt wasn't shy to target the lower level himself. However, Labanner increased the pressure, aiming to behead the Samoan in the corner. By the end of the opening stretch, the first warning signs appeared. In the second, Mark attempted blitzkriegs at different heights to breach the enemy's defense. But Labanner wasn't that kind of a Frenchman. Later into the battle, Hunt's only option was episodic detonations. While the European Giga Chad confidently marched toward the victory. Making a commendable debut in the land of the rising sun, Mark lost by decision, and his transformation into a fluffy darling of Japanese schoolgirls was put on hold.
For that appearance, it was $27,000 US, which was a lot of money, especially for the time that and everything was free. They looked after everything, and then they paid me as well. And I was like, wow, this is pretty cool.
The opportunity to reclaim his standing presented itself in February 2001 at the Melbourne Grand Prix, where Hunt progressed up the bracket in less than a minute.
Here comes the pain.
That's it. That's all, ladies and gentlemen. The easy transition into the next round.
He proved to be even nastier in the semis and overdosed the adversary on strikes by the 48th second.
The sleeping pill.
The Super Samoan found himself in the final against his former teammate, Peter Graham. Further down the road, the Australian karateka would win several regional Grand Prix.
Jab, short right hand, double jab. He's gone!
And make some noise with his trademark Rolling Thunders. Smelling like sunshine, Graham wasn't afraid of Hunt.
Certainly showing a lot of heart.
But the Samoan set out to prove it was a mistake.
K-1 Oceania.
And I think Peter just got two good face kicks into mark before.
And so the judgment night began.
Oh, there's that nicely timed uppercut that we spoke of earlier.
Peter Graham into the final minute now of the fight.
There it is!
An uppercut from hell produced the perfect illustration of a soul leaving the body and secured Hunt's victory in his second Grand Prix in the span of a year.
I've never been hit that hard in my life.
The Super Samoan returned to the tournament format 4 months later, locking horns with Japanese warrior Jerome Amada. The spirited Amada fended off a couple of assaults. Hunt unloaded to all levels. Then probed with a jab. And placed a signature shot. The Japanese fighter's chances for a happy ending were slimmer than Hachiko's. Uncorking an overhand and walking away nonchalantly, Mark left to prepare for the next lap. He drew Ernesto Hoost in the semis. The Dutchman had long proven that apart from tulips, his main export was devastating knockouts. Over the last 2 years, Mr. Perfect had won 15 out of 16 showings. And became K-1 champion for the third time. Hunt tried to take the initiative from the get-go. Soon he realized that each push resulted in counterattacks and inevitable low kicks. Getting the gist of it, the Samoan started throwing second himself. Now Hoost was showered by a hail of missiles. Halfway through the match, the Dutchman got toppled with a body punch and had to work hard to stay on his feet thereafter. Ernesto was in luck. Mark slowed down from an adrenaline dump. Having cooled off entering the third frame, both threw tactics out the window and went for it Smash Bros style. They met the bell, still swinging. A close decision victory was awarded to the more high-profile Hoost. Meanwhile, the sensational performance gave Hunt the opportunity to break into the World Grand Prix. In the semis of the qualifying tournament, he encountered Ray Sefo. Finishing second the previous year, Sugarfoot had a reputation for not only having infinity gauntlets for gloves,
И вот уже отстаивает Evil, просто отстаивает. Вот как я вам уже говорил, это...
but also being a happy-go-lucky guy who keeps his chin up even when things get crazy. Hunt had nothing to lose against Sefo, and he ran straight across the ring to hammer Sugar into the ropes. Following a hefty serving of overhands, Mark took his time in the clinch. Back in the center, the compatriots plunged into a nirvana of absolute violence for a whole minute. By the end of the first chapter, Ray was a bit fresher and took the front seat. He didn't ignore the entertainment aspect either. Early into the second, the level of intensity remained absurdly high. And yet, when the winded Super Samoan chose to block strikes exclusively with his head, no one expected Sefo to endorse Mark's idea. The round ended with a series of close-range offerings. The dog-tired gladiators opened the third with a sudden burst of activity. Avalanches of non-stop exchanges came one after another. Having already tested all their tricks on each other, they closed the show swangin' and bangin'. The fight of the year, a vivid display of what a lack of self-preservation instincts looks like in practice, resulted in Sefo's triumph. Unfortunately, he was forced to withdraw with an eye injury, and Mark automatically advanced to the finals. His dance partner was the veteran Adam Watt, who had been turning opponents sleep mode on since the inception of K-1. In the semis, Watt starched none other than Mike Bernardo. So, without any hope of getting off lightly, Hunt pressured him from the jump. Watt was still in it, blasting spectacular kicks. And punching from a safe distance. Nevertheless, Mark slowed down the Australian with low kicks, ruffled his feathers by breaking into the phone booth, and dragged him into a melee. Hoping to shut Watt down for good, the Super Samoan stepped into close quarters. Adam somehow persevered and fired back until the bell rang. In the third stretch, he started bleeding. Watt was forced to launch a last resort assault. But it was the end of the road for him. causing multiple collapses and securing a TKO victory, Hunt earned himself a ticket to the Grand Prix finale in Japan. The biggest tournament of 2001 took place on December 8th at the famous Tokyo Dome Stadium. In front of 65,000 spectators, the 8 best heavyweight strikers had to scrap with each other in one night to determine the strongest of the bunch. During the draw, Mark was allowed to choose, and he called out the name Le Banner, one of the bracket favorites, undefeated in his last 14 battles. Early into their rematch, the chiseled Frenchman hoped to plunge Hunt into darkness with his kicks. Mark was soon trying to find his rhythm, detonating from a long distance. Soon both became more eager to trade. By the second frame, Hunt was clearly losing the long-range gun plays. That's when he switched to FU attitude and remembered his days in the hood. Mark lured the cold-blooded cyborg to the ropes again, made him start aiming, and swooped into action. Convincing Le Banner to get into a shootout and wobbling him with a series of hooks, Hunt planted a couple of 1-2s. A tactical gambit and 24 unanswered strikes secured Mark's ticket to the semifinals. He was greeted by Stefan the Lightning Lecco. Just before the Grand Prix, the Karateka St. Peter Arts straight to his ancestors, and would go on to tame the wicked Badr Hari. Unfortunately for the German, Hunt woke up and chose violence. The Samoan Dumbo floated around the ring for 3 rounds with cumulative bursts, and kept landing the right hand at will, both on the front foot and as a means of retribution. Looking for revenge, Stefan spun like a tornado, occasionally delivering sharp reprisals. Still, despite fleeting glimpses of hope, the fireballs were flying Lecco's way more often. Upon consecutive attempts to divide the German striker by 0, the merciful Samoan opted for a decision win that would suffice, and proceeded to the key fight of his career.
And what's shit thing about it, as I was drinking with him the night before that, it was me and him the last 2 drinking. I was like, oh, shit. And I was like, bro, well, you know, this is just business and this is just working.
Mark's entrance in the finale was worthy of a king. His opponent, the Brazilian karateka Francisco Filho, had duked it out with legends like Greco, Hoog, and Hoost. Earlier that night, the 3-time champion Arts tipped over Filho. So he and Hunt were expected to produce an old-school skull-crushing. Meanwhile, Mark resisted the primitive urge to jump at the seasoned counter-striker and worked with single shots to the torso. Francisco mirrored his actions. sometimes delivering his trademark roundhouse kicks. Then Hunt switched to multi-level combinations. Overall, all 3 rounds that passed were razor close. The judges were hungry for more and called for an extra chapter. Mark showed to be the hungrier of the two. Putting maximum effort into making the Brazilian pay his dues. In the end, the Samoan Cinderella won the judges' favor, as well as $400,000, and a place in the history books as one of the 9 champions of the most prestigious kickboxing Grand Prix.
Now, it wasn't just a worthless bit of dirt. This part that I was undertaking is actually worth it.
Mark instantly became a star and signed a more lucrative contract. However, after buying a house for his parents, he encountered father's intense hostility once again. It was a huge mental blow, and the Super Samoan spiraled out of control, spending entire nights in casinos and smoking a whole batch of Heisenberg's crystal goodies. Rumors started circulating about a potential encounter with Cro Cop, K-1's strongest asset. First, the hardly sober Mark got a tune-up contest against Tsuyoshi Nakasako. Using his newly gained weight, Hunt effortlessly overwhelmed his opponent with sheer mass. And made him fly like a lemming. The resilient Nakasako experienced another crash. But, as it turned out, he was trickier than your ex. Setting up a date between Mark and the canvas with a high kick, Tsuyoshi rushed in, chasing the upset. Having recovered, Hunt sang a venomous lullaby and finally put the Midnight Samurai to sleep. By launching a hypersonic missile, Mark caused a series of earthquakes that led to the Japanese fighter collapsing. Although dealing with a hand injury in March 2002, Hunt agreed to a showdown with Mirko Filipovic, the 2000 Grand Prix runner-up who possessed the deadliest left kick in combat sports. The scales had long begged Hunt to curb his appetite, yet it was the nimble Cro Cop who first managed to make the Samoan helplessly swing at the air, and regret being short and therefore easy to kick. Even in mid-range, Mark couldn't find the rhythm. He came to life only sporadically. While the Croatian headhunter delivered heavy blows without a job. By round 3, Mirko had the timing down for the heavy left fist. Hunt was openly slipping the cross on his right. And Cro Cop fired the cemetery high kick. The audience watched in awe as the Samoan gods resurrected Mark. Sadly, they did not grant him the power to turn things around. Despite tasting the ring surface and getting outstruck by every metric imaginable, Mark did not learn any lessons. In the summer of that year, still injured, Hunt agreed to a clash against Le Banner in Paris. The Daredevils jumped into a heated trilogy for the Best Bleached Hair title. Mark rammed Cyborg into the ropes, hoping to turn him into Sleeping Beauty. Jerome came back swinging and grazed the Samoan's eye with a punch, which made Hunt a sucker for the right hook in the second stretch. Le Banner sought to capitalize on the opportunity. Mark endured and reciprocated. The next minute of Killer Be Killed action doesn't require any commentary. Don't you dare sit down while watching. After they both knocked on Heaven's door, Mark ate a high kick late in the second round. He didn't want to stop, but his manager intervened and threw in the towel. The Super Samoan was concise post-fight.
It was a terrible loss. It was a good fight, but can't win them all. Maybe next time.
Nevertheless, Hunt began to doubt his manager's loyalty and pressed charges for stealing $300,000. Having spent a significant amount of time in court, Mark came back in the fall against Mike Bernardo. The White Rhino was the 1996 runner-up and always lived up to his threatening nickname. Just like always, the South African was expecting a wild safari. However, Mark regained his form over the past months and showed up for the brawl fully prepared. He systematically hunted down the enemy's body, polished Mike's skull with strikes, and slammed low kicks now more than ever. Bernardo remained hopeful until the final seconds of the clash. Still, his animal instincts weren't enough to get the stoppage. And the decision rightfully went to Mark. The most important tournament of the year took place in December 2002. In the quarterfinals, Hunt encountered Lecco, whose hair dye started to peel off immediately. In the early going, Mark sat in the driver's seat so firmly that he even dared to play around with kicks to different levels. The German had nothing to offer except targeting the legs. Unfortunately for Hunt, one of those low kicks damaged his left knee.
右に回り込んでいくレコ、それを止めるために左です。
Stefan tried to seize control,
ラウンドは勝負だと思うんですけども。
ローキック、そしてパンチ。
おー、レコ来ましたよ、レコ来ましたよ。
レコが来た。
but the Samoan went full Fast and Furious mode.
手数では左フックですね。狙ってましたね。
左が入ってしまったステファン・レコ。
Signing Leco's death warrant with a leaping left hook,
一発。
the noticeably limping Hunt marched on to the semifinals.
連覇に向けて。
The old frenemy LeBanner welcomed him with a strike to his weak spot.
さあいきなりローから入って。
The Frenchman had no intention of showing mercy and unleashed a genocidal campaign of low kicks.
マーカントしかし敗れた第1ラウンド。このローキックです。
効いた。
The Super Samoan had no options except to spin the windmill and hope for the best.
因縁の対決をね繰り広げてきました。
どっちが勝ってもおかしくないですよ。
倒す倒さないきたくなりました。ハントが出る。ハントが出る。していく。出ていった右のパー。
ブロックします、ブロックします。
The strategy fell apart halfway through the bout.
今年は序盤全く制裁がありませんが。
効いてますね。
Hunt should have at least got a Medal of Honor just for continuing the fight with one functioning knee.
右のハイキック、そしてワンツー。右からのワンツー。ここから冷静にいく。ローキック、ローキック。
Cyborg couldn't believe his censors himself, realizing that Mark's will was just as iron as his own heart.
準決勝まではツーノックダウン制。ローキック、ローキック。
すごい試合ですよ、これ。
王者の意地。
変わらないですよ。
王者の意地か。
変わらないですよ。
それとも
変わらないですよ。変わらないですよ。
Both men's looks entering the final round spoke volumes. Exhausted, LeBanner put sincere effort into breaking Hunt's legs for good.
最後に勝っている。何ガードしたか。戦いを宿命づけられた。サモアの血が流れている。
And then spent his gasoline leftovers bashing the enemy's concrete head.
やはりこの2人の試合は壮絶。左ストレート。
At this point, Mark rode a wave of adrenaline. He jumped into the fiery pit. And almost pulled off a miracle by the end.
残り10秒。
まだなんかハントいってほしいですね。
In the span of 9 minutes, the K-1 Berserkers created a perfect thriller. Even Hunt's shattered knee and Cyborg's overheated CPU weren't enough to stop the clock. As a result, LeBanner advanced to the finals with a costly decision, and Mark ended up in the hospital.
So, what's gonna happen to you after this?
Probably go and put some more ice on my legs and ponder some deep thoughts about what I'm going to do.
The slugfest became a turning point for Hunt. The contract signed by his former manager was 4 times less lucrative than the offers he received in MMA, and Mark began preparations for a transfer.
Pride Championships, you know? What the hell is that shit? It's mixed martial arts, you know? You pay $250,000. I said, bullshit, give me a look at that contract. I've never been doing mixed martial arts. But I signed up.
In 2003, he was forced to confront Gary Goodridge to settle his obligations to the league. With his leg practically immobilized, the Super Samoan didn't go out of his way to sit Big Daddy down, and treated it more like a sparring session. It was clear that Hunt was bothered by his lingering injury. Therefore, he would sometimes allow Goodridge to roll out the cannons and entertain the crowd by unloading. Overall, Mark completely controlled the fight and won the decision without much trouble.
That was the end of my K-1 kickboxing career. You know, there was my world title gone and my everything else gone.
Up until 2008, Hunt would leave kickboxing behind. He would return only once versus Semi Schilt, the future greatest heavyweight in the history of the sport. Mark met him coming off a streak of 3 consecutive Grand Prix victories. So he agreed to do it without much preparation, purely for the fun of it. At first, the 34-year-old Hunt did everything possible to chop down the giant's legs, and then launched springing overhands. Keeping away from the explosive adversary, Schilt utilized his attributes.
He's also beaten Peter Graham. He knocked out Paul Slowinski.
And threw low kicks himself. But as soon as Mark started to land, Sammy pulled the ace from his sleeve.
Final 10 seconds of the opening round. It's been some shots now.
A spinning back kick shocked the New Zealander and the whole arena, marking Hunt's last dance under K-1 rules.
Kicks like a horse.
Before retiring at the age of 48 in 2022, Mark would once again strap the big gloves on, albeit his grand exit would take place in the boxing ring.
Going for the kill. He's hit hunting. He's the big shot.
Oh, it's over already.
It's
going over. My God.
Hunt in his final fight.
Nowadays, the Super Samoan is remembered primarily for his legendary deeds in MMA, while in reality, Hunt forged his legacy back in his kickboxing days, where he engaged in brutal wars with combat sports icons. And swept across the World Grand Prix like a meteor. By far the nastiest slugger of his generation. A poster boy for walk-off knockouts. And one of the few who can name almost any fight when asked about the best ones. If you like this video and want to see more K-1 Stars Chronicles, drop a nuke on the like button, subscribe to the channel, and vote for sport.